So tonight we have a panel of amazing people, and we have to ask them lots and lots of questions because I told them they only had to talk for about 10 minutes, so we need to keep them up there for a long time, okay? So from DHS, I feel like I'm standing right in the way. We have Cory, Pedersen, and Sara Stolt. They're going to kind of give us a rundown of what they do, how they're involved with foster care, and if we have questions for them, please ask. I'll hand it off. Then we have Sharla and Jim. They are guardian of Litems. What I've asked from them, and it was kind of weird, but I had a kiddo in my house for over 2 years, and I got a phone call from a lady in Beulah. And with this whole COVID world, you can't see people or meet people face to face. And she said, well, I'm a guardian of Litem for so-and-so. And I'm like, I've had him for 2 years. Why have I never heard of you? And we have a confidentiality. We have, all this kind of stuff. So what I asked these guys was if they could give us kind of like a list of people that work with them or in our area, that type of thing, so that we have a reference when we get a phone call. We should be talking to these guys, okay? And then we have Mr. Amazing Nick. Nick actually deals a lot with my kiddos because I take teenagers, and he runs the 18 plus program, or the independent living program. After we try to get them, try to spread their wings a little bit, Nick really has to make them fly, but God bless you, Nick. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Sara and Sara and Cory. I know, that's why I rolled off my tongue.
One housekeeping item. So if you need restrooms, they're right out these 2 double doors. There's one here and around the corner.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everybody. As they said, my name is Cory Pedersen. I'm the Director of Children and Family Services with the Department of Human Services. I do see some familiar faces over the years. I probably spoke at this group a couple times when I was the Director of Juvenile Court here in Bismarck. Anyway, my role now is a couple of things. We are the program and policy for all things foster care, child protection, child care licensing, and all those things. So I have a team of folks that do the administrative rules, make sure we're following federal law, make sure we're getting you guys are getting paid through 4E eligibility. But really, futuristically, what we're looking at is we're also going to be taking on, and Sarah's going to talk about this a little bit, is we'll be taking on the foster care licensing team here coming up in 2022. That just came out in the legislation. So the one thing from our perspective, what we try to do is make sure that regulations are being followed through state and federal laws so that we can continue to pay to keep kids safe in foster homes, in their parental homes if possible, but mostly for your guys' sake in foster homes. And so we offer the support and the guidance and the coaching and the training to the social workers in the zones, Burleigh County zone or Three River zone, as we know it now, and just so they are following the regulations and policies for what's best for kids, what's best for foster families, what's best for families. And so that's primarily my role, overseeing a team, writing and doing regulations around foster care and foster care payment. I'll pass it to Sarah.
That was way less than 10 minutes, but I'll make up for it.
Bill knows that.
Yeah. Sara Stolt, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Department of Human Services, and I'm also a foster parent and an adoptive parent of kids who are in foster care. So I feel like I sometimes get a unique perspective because I've been through this as a foster parent and then going through reunification process and the adoption process, but then also as an administrator on the program and policy side with the Department of Human Services. My family moved here about 1.5 years ago from Fargo. So we had done foster care work through Cass County and then now are licensed in Burleigh County. But I'm going to talk a little bit about human service zones because those are kind of new as of January 1, 2020, and they replace what was formerly known as county social services. So the human service zones are really the mechanism that you guys are working day to day with. They have the social workers, the CPS workers, in-home workers, the foster care licensors as of today, and they are your primary point of contact in terms of setting up licensing, relicensing, as well as doing CPS assessments with families. The state does not have the direct care workers that are going out and doing any of that work. That's all being housed at the human service zones. And the unique relationship is that while the state provides funding and, to Cory's point, program and policy oversight, we do not provide employment or day-to-day operations for the zones. They are each individually employed within their county. So Burley Human Service Zone, for example, they're employees of Burley County. And so they still have opportunities as independent employees of counties to really take the program and policy and the materials that we give them and really make them work in their communities. And so because of that, we do find unique differences between maybe how things are handled with the sheriff's department in Morton versus the sheriff's department in Burley when there is a call, or how the timing might work with a community. And so that's something that's important to kind of keep in mind, is that we try and create consistency through program and policy. And we have minimums that really have to be met, but the zones really can adjust some of that based on what works in their community. You know, we have many communities, for example, that don't have hospitals. And so they might be partnering with neighboring larger communities if a 960 report were to come in from a hospital. But in terms of foster care specifically, the zone director, or what used to be known as the county social services director, is actually the custodian of the child that is in foster care. And that did change on January 1st, 2020. It was the state that was the custodian, which meant that you know, every decision made in terms of major medical care, give me an idea of some other decisions. It was all bubbling up to the state, essentially, to make those decisions. And we really felt that the local director, who knew their community and knew the needs of the family and the resources in that community, was better equipped to make those decisions and to really understand what was in the best interest of the child. And so that law did change January 1st, 2020. So now each zone director is the custodian of the child. With that said, you'll find that some zone directors are very active in child and family team meetings. Others aren't. They're not required to be. And so if that's a question you guys have, that's definitely not a role they have to play. We find that really depends on the size of the community. In our more rural zones, where the zone director is probably also the CPS supervisor and maybe the foster supervisor, they're probably more engaged in the day-to-day child welfare work. Whereas in more of our larger zones, they're likely going to only be involved when it comes down to that TPR or family reunification decision, or if there's major medical decisions. So you may not see active engagement of zone directors. We also have about 50% of our zone directors who come from the child welfare world, and the other half who aren't social workers or haven't worked in eligibility, but are coming from an administration world. And so that also presents some differences. If I'm a CPS worker that becomes a supervisor, that becomes a zone director, I'm likely to be much more engaged in the child welfare process than a zone director who doesn't have any child welfare experience. So we have 19 human service zones across the state. So in this area, you're going to be dealing with Burley Human Service Zone, and we still do not have a director. So if you have questions on that, let me know. We have Three Rivers Human Service Zone, which is Dennis Meyer, who's the director. We have Dakota Central, which is Steve Reiser, and that's McLean, Mercer, Oliver, Sheridan. And so those would be the primary zones in this area. I believe that would make up Region 7, correct? Am I missing any zones? Okay, so I just want to talk real briefly about the process. We get a lot of calls at the department on concerns regarding foster placement, or my foster care supervisor didn't call me back, or I haven't heard from my worker. And it's really important that you work at the local level with your human service zone when you have those concerns. And so what we always say is it starts at the zone level, where you work with your case manager first, and then you might go to your case manager's supervisor, then the zone director, and then ultimately the zone board if you have any concerns. We absolutely hope it doesn't get to that, but at the department level, we are in a position where we might help with, with very specific issues, but we are not able to resolve necessarily local issues, because remember, they're not our employees. Those are county employees. So we are definitely a resource that can answer questions. We do have a relationship where we have accountability, or the zones have accountability to us, and we do have a performance management component to that, but really we're pushing decisions to be made at the local level with zones. So with that, I probably could keep going on and talking about zones. I think I'll pass it to Sharla, and then we can come back with questions.
Jim and I are both from Youth Work, so we're good at our jobs, but we sat wrong today. Jim is going to do the history part, so I'm going to pass this on.
And I was going to give you my 10 minutes, but.
Everybody who knows me knows I can talk. My
So
husband's also-
there's is that the one with the red face? I'm just going to really briefly give you a little bit of an overview of the Guardian ad litem program. Guardian ad litems have been used in the North Dakota courts since the mid 80s. The program, as you kind of see it now, really started in 2000, and it started under the UND Law School, and it really started only in the Grand Forks and Fargo area. I wish I would have been able to bring more current numbers in terms of the cases that we end up dealing with, but there's about 4 statutes that end up speaking to the guardian ad litem role. They're in the Uniform Juvenile Justice Act. They're in the Guardianship of Minor Act. And basically what that's all evolved from is just this recognition that children don't necessarily have an entity that's just looking out for their best interests. That doesn't mean that the county worker isn't dedicated to doing what is right for the child, but they have a variety of demands that they have to meet and address. Whereas as the guardian ad litem, the idea is we just speak to the best interests of the child. And it's also recognizing that, and the law even states this, a parent's interests could be contradictory to what's the best interest of the child. So that's the purpose of the Guardian ad litem program. And right now we're funded by the Supreme Court. And our program, the Sharla and my employer, is Youth Works. Youth Works has the administrative grant for those funds. So that's just kind of a background. We had our training too long ago. I can't even remember the numbers that we've been looking at in the state. I do think it's worth mentioning, because this is Region 7, that at least a year ago, we were by far the busiest region in the state. Burleigh County was busier than, actually there were certain areas of cases that Burleigh County had more than all of the other state combined. So we've been busy. That was my 10 minutes.
Thank you. I think, sorry. Oh, I'm a trooper. I look around and I'm so thankful for my job, because you guys, rock stars. I've did it. This taking children into your home and fostering is tough. It's tough. Stole my car, rolled it, started my house on fire, flooded my house. Oh yeah, sorry. It's another group. My name is Sharla and I'm recovering from. Sorry, I went down that road. I know. But you guys are amazing. Taking in children is amazing. And I've sat at a lot of kitchen tables. I've sat in a lot of living rooms and visited with you folks about the good things that you're doing with kids. I appreciate when you guys go and have some fun and de-escalate a little bit, and I appreciate the pictures. I need that. So Jim and Barb and I are the workers that you guys would probably be working with out of this area. Barb is our supervisor. Her and I are both full-time, so we take on the bulk of the kids when they come through. I think Jim is just as busy though, because this area stays very busy with kids. This area is also really kind of blossoming with guardianships. Private guardianships have become very important for this area. So we do a lot of that. We work also with TPRs, which seems odd. It was odd when it began, but there are such a thing as private TPRs. And so, sure. So, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm just wobbling, man. Would you spell it? So termination of parental rights. So when the county does a TPR, I appreciate the way that it works, because by the time that the county does a termination of parental rights, they've done all of the things to help the parents get to where they should be. They have asked them to do whatever it is that was concerning as what led to the deprivation. They go a certain amount of days. They work very hard towards helping the families get the children back. The federal government, I always forget the days, is at 440 out of Thank you. You in the back. I've never met you before. I know. No, I'm messing with you. Anywho, so what the county does then at that point in time is they're demanded by the federal government to petition the court for termination of parental rights. So they do that, and there's a full-on trial. Parents can have lawyers. Everybody should be involved. So it's a more comfortable situation for me in that we've had the county do all of the work, have asked many times, please, can we help you? Can we drive you there? When it's a private TPR, none of that has happened. So it's a little bit uncomfortable for those of us going in and saying, it's typically one person. I've always been a mother that I've worked with that says, I want to terminate dad's parental rights. And so to try to do all of the work that the county does good work. All the work that the county has done, try to do that in a short amount of time is just really difficult. So that's one of the other things we do is guardianships and TPRs. We stay very busy with all of that. When we first get assigned, we get assigned by the court, and the judge and court gives us a release of information. So that lets us talk to everybody, the therapist, to foster parents, to anybody that we need to gather information from. Do y'all know when we're coming to you? Do you know what we're asking for? Do you know what we're looking for? I know we talk a lot about our report. We got to get a report done. We got to have a report. I think I say it a million times a day. Do you know what it is we're looking for to fill that report in for the judge? Okay, so what we're asking of foster parents, because you guys know better than anybody else, we talk to everybody, of course, but what we're asking for is how are visitations going with the parents? Are they happening? Help me out with this stuff. Do you remember?
Well, am I supposed to eat it too now? What? Yeah, so if we're going to talk best interest, obviously we have to know pretty comprehensively what's going on with the kids. And one of the things that I always look to foster parents for is not if they have, but whether they have seen responses from the kids relative to visitations with the parents, and whatever you see is what's important. So like if you see the child or children really demonstrating a lot of behavior that shows they're looking forward to that contact with the parent, maybe a lot of behavior afterwards that indicates that separation from the parent was really difficult for them. Well, that tells us something as a guardian ad litem about the relationship, because we'll also see cases where the children are saying to the foster parents, they're really resistant to any of those visits, or they'll come back from the visits and you'll have to deal with certain types of behaviors. Well, it's not like we're in a position that we have a magic crystal ball and we can know what that means, but it's facts that we put in our report. This is what the foster parent has told us and has witnessed. A lot of times, my experience anyway, is that the foster parents, especially where there's a great relationship between the case manager at the county and the foster parents are doing a lot of those doctor visits. The foster parents are the ones who are in the doctor's office exchanging information with the doctor And the case manager knows the specifics, but oftentimes the foster parent knows the greater details of that situation. So it's like the health and well-being of the children, it's the interaction with the parents, it's the foster parent's perception of how the child is doing in their home. You know, is the child demonstrating that they're really comfortable in the home, or is the child demonstrating that they are having some anxiety over different things? And another thing that oftentimes I see foster parents kind of being the first source of information on is those therapy appointments. Like, are the kids indicating that, are they indicating that they like going to therapy? It's like I share a story from a visit I did this afternoon. I visited with a little 3-year-old who's just reunited with her mother, and it's one of the, to be honest, one of the 2 rarest stories, but it's where the mom has just been a rock star. I mean, she's just done everything that the plan indicated she should do, and it, you know, you go to those situations as a guardian ad litem, and it's just like, okay, this is what we wish we saw all the time. Anyway, this little girl is 3 years old, and she had just started with an occupational therapist. And so I was asking her, you know, how does she like it? How do you like it? Are you in? Oh yeah, I like it. And, well, what are you doing? Well, today we brushed teeth, and I'm thinking, this is magical. Like, I don't know how many people have had kids that get excited about brushing their teeth. I thought, where was this occupational therapist about 20 years ago? So that's, you know, I guess there's really, I can't put a finite sort of parameters around what we ask foster parents, because I just kind of start out with, well, tell me everything you can tell me. And then we work our way from there. Not enough. No, seriously, I mean, it's like, for me, oftentimes I'll like, if it's younger kids, I'll get the information from the foster parent, and I have to, and you know, Sharla and I might do things a little different, so I want her to respond to this too. But one of the things for me is that information can change so quickly. The status of something can change so quickly that I don't necessarily, I mean, I want to talk to the foster parent and meet with the children as close to the deadline of my report having to get in as I can. Because I like I said, things could change a lot in between there. Especially with some older kids, there have been cases where I know when I'm going in to talk to that kid that I have to be really, really careful about what kind of questions I ask him or her. I don't want to put a kid through any of the kind of information presenting that they've had to go through, justifiably had to go through, throughout a Child Protective Services investigation. That's, to me, that's potentially unnecessarily re-traumatizing them when that information is always already there through the social worker. But I'm going to try to get information that just kind of generally tells me, how you doing, how's school going. You know, there's been times where my meeting with the kid has kind of ended up being the place where people discovered the kid was experiencing some bullying. Well, that might not have a lot to do with my guardian ad litem report, but it certainly has a lot to do with what ends up happening then in the school, because I'm going to meet with the teachers too, and you can bet I'm going to tell them that this is something that I've heard. So that's.
Are you also wondering about how we get assigned and when we get assigned? I don't know that either. So what happens whether it's a brand new, like if it's a shelter care case, I remember just talking to Mary Jo not long ago, and she gave me great information to pass on to the judge. Whether it's a shelter care or a child is coming back. So if it's a shelter care hearing and we just get assigned, we get in right away and we start talking to, I call foster parents first too. How are they doing? How are they eating? How are they sleeping? Are they transitioning? Is it feeling like they're comfortable? We'll stay with that case through the disposition of that. So when the judge finally says, here's the answer to what's going to happen for this child, they terminate us. So I typically say I've been fired twice this week because they just fire us each time. And then we stop. We used to stay on, which I loved. I loved it because we could keep going back to the home and we could gather our own information instead of calling a social worker and saying, I got about 5 minutes before I have to get my report done. Can you catch me up in a year's worth of what you did? I know. And so we are just assigned for a short amount of time. So when a child then comes back, the child stays in care for 12 months. There's another court hearing coming up. Then we get a call again. Now you jump back in and you work again until the judge makes a decision again, and then we're back out. So it feels like we're running fast, trying to get as much information as we can quickly. That is exactly what we're doing, is trying to catch up. And typically, and I feel bad about this a little bit, when we call foster parents, we're the first ones to call. Typically, they don't even know there's a court hearing coming up. And they're kind of taken aback, and we have to just talk about what happened and why we're here and what's happening, and try to catch up. Especially. I just did that today.
I just want to share from personal experience. I have found in Burley, I know way more when court is happening than I knew in Cass, because there just seems to be more engagement. And I'm not dogging Cass, but you never know when court is happening in Cass. But here I always have received at least some type of notification, which I have found to be valuable.
Yeah. Once in a while, we'll have a month or maybe even 2, but mostly when I get the call, my report's already late. It should be in between 5 and 7 days, and my report's already late. That might be because they got a late notice. Until there's a new petition, until they go back into court for ask for an extension.
It depends on what, are you asking? So I think I can answer that better by just walking through. So, and we'll take kind of a standard case. The most common case that we deal with probably is where we will get notice that there's been what they call an emergency removal. And a lot of times that's accompanied by both information from the human service zone and the law enforcement report. Well, that by statute, then that shelter care, that emergency custody order, the hearing on that has to be held very quickly. That's, I think, where Sharla's talking about. It's like, then we'll find out about the case. So we might find out about the case. I've gotten cases where I find out at 4 o'clock in the afternoon about a 10 o'clock in the morning hearing the next day. So that's actually become more common because the courts got so backed up with COVID. That kind of thing has become more common. One of the things that we'll most likely both try to do is contact the foster parent just to see, okay, the child's probably only been there 1, 2, maybe at the most 3 days, but how's it going? So when we walk into that shelter care hearing, we at least have that kind of information. Then after the shelter care hearing, there's going to be an initial hearing, which, what kind of sense does that make? Doesn't initial usually mean first? But it's never the first, And so there'll be the initial hearing, and that's where they'll really, we try to get our report done before that. And there's a 30 to 60 day timeline between the shelter care hearing and the initial hearing. We try to get our report in 5 working days prior to that initial hearing. But in reality, that initial hearing could just be the start of the process, because the reason they have that initial hearing is for the court to ensure that the parents have been given their rights. And I don't know what Sharla's practice is, but mine is whenever I meet with parents, the very first thing or our very first meeting, I'm going to ask them if they know they have a right to an attorney, because they have the right to the attorney once the petition's filed. They don't have to go to the court to find out about that right. And I'll make sure that they know that. I'll make sure that they know how they can get an attorney. And they'll say, no, we don't need one. And then they'll get in front of the judge and then they decide they need one. So then everything just starts over again. Then they have to reschedule the hearing. Yeah. And so then we get to the actual what might be either that there might be something then at the continued hearing where a decision is made, or it might go to trial. And when it goes to trial, I just got notice today about a case that has now been bumped down the road for ultimately 6 months from when the initial hearing was held till the trial was being held. And so, you could, so in terms of Sharla and we could talk to foster parents that second night the child is in their home. And as we're watching the situation progress, not want to be bothering the foster parents again until we get closer to that trial date, because we don't know how many things are going to change in there. But so, you could look at a case where you have a shelter care hearing, you have the initial hearing, and the parents stipulate that yes, there's deprivation, and the court makes a ruling, custody goes to the human service zone, and Sharla and I are terminated. We're done now until a year comes around. Then there's got to be a permanency hearing. So is that kind of the other thing that I was going to say, because it had to do with getting contacted by somebody and their guardian ad litem, but you've never met them. I'm pretty sure nobody's out there as imposter guardian ad litems. I don't know why there would be, but but we'll be the ones wearing the masks. No, I'm kidding. But one of the things that I always try to get from people in Peggy's role is I always try to find out if the foster parents have an email address, because then I try to send them an email and attach a copy of my guardian ad litem appointment, so they know that they're not dealing with a concern about confidentiality. And I will say one thing to foster parents in general. I totally appreciate when I started doing this, that's what I do, is I call them and I'd have foster parents just kind of basically like, well, I don't know who you are and I'm not going to talk to you. And it's like, good, that's a fine thing. But that's one of the things that I've tried to make a more common practice, so that the foster parents get that document and they know that the court has put us in a position to have the authority to get that information.
You keep going.
Sharla's like, don't pass it this way.
My name's Nick Roeder. I run the 3 programs out of Bismarck through PATH, which is a nonprofit that operates throughout our state. Currently, I run what they call the Chafee program, which is a federal program that's operated in every state in the United States, but is sort of ran by some of them are run by like county, social services, and then others are run by nonprofits among the state. And so it's kind of, there's some states that have like 2 coordinators for the entire state, where like North Dakota has 1 in each region, with the exception of some of the smaller regions where we double dip. But I run Chafee, and then I run supervised independent living program, and then the accommodated independent living program, which are new programs as of like November 2019, I think, is when we placed the first kid in that. And so the Chafee program is offered. So basically how it works, I mean, any youth that's 14 years or older in foster care, county or human service owned caseworkers are legally required to refer those kids to our program. And then it's a voluntary program, so youth doesn't have to participate in that program, but it's offered to every youth that's in foster care 14 years of age or older. And then I'm able to work with them anywhere from 14 years old all the way up to 26. That's the big age range, but it varies depending upon their situation and what happens. And but yeah, so that's that's how they get referred to me, I guess. If you have, I mean, if there are cases where the kids, you know, in a foster home, maybe 16 years old, and I've had foster parents reach out to me and say, hey, how come you're not working with this kid? Sometimes I may not have a referral for that kid. That helps me because then I can then reach out and say, you know, most of the time I probably know, you know, the caseworker, and I can reach out and say, hey, and they're probably working on getting me that referral or whatever. So, so that helps. Caseworker wise, it helps a lot if they introduce the program to the youth. It's difficult for me. I mean, I do it, but we'll reach out to referrals, and you know, oftentimes I'll be speaking to a 14, 15, 16-year-old kid. Yeah. Like from the day a kid turns 14? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yeah. 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 So there's a lot of factors. So right now, like in this region, I hover around 50 kids on my caseload, and so it's on a I mean, we can, you know, accept referrals, refuse referrals kind of right now just because of where my caseload's at. And in all honesty, right now, I'm usually I'm working with 16 and up, just because of if I opened up to 14-year-olds, I, you know, could potentially double my caseload or whatever, you know. And so right now it's generally 16 and up. I'll open up some 15-year-olds that are, you know, 15 and a half or getting towards 16, or and then I'll open them up. But I mean, we've even gotten to a point where, and this kind of gets probably too in depth, but we have like, we rank them, you know, as a priority 1 or a priority 2. So if it's a kid that's going to probably age out of foster care, they're a priority 1 within the program, and it opens up a lot more benefits financially in the program and the length of time that I can work with them. If they're going to, you know, if their permanency plan or their permanency goal is reunification and they're probably not going to age out of foster care, we rank them as a P2. And so at times we'll even, you know, open up kids based on priority status and where they're going to be at. But in all honesty, probably every referral that I receive, I reach out to, just because there, you know, there's kids that aren't interested in the program, or, you know, 14-year-olds that are like, I don't want that yet, or I'm not, you know, and that's fine. And the cool thing about the program is they can come into that program at any point and they can leave that program at any point. I've had, you know, kids come into the program multiple times. So they'll come in at 16, work with me until they're 18 and go, I got everything, I'm good to go. I got to figure it out at 18. And then 6 months down the road, I get a phone call and they realize they don't have it figured out yet and they need a little bit of help. And then like they can be back in the program. So it's nice that it's fluid like that. But I mean, I know like in like the Dickinson area, for instance, like our coordinator that's out there, I'm pretty sure she's opened up 14, 15-year-olds right now just to bump her caseload up. But it kind of depends on where you're at. But like I said, it's pretty rare that like right now, every single 16-year-old that comes through my referrals, I 100% reach out to them. So yeah. Yeah. To be in the program? Well, the only thing they have to do to be in the program is be in foster care after the age of 14 and have monthly contact with me. And that monthly contact can be in the form of a text message, phone call, face-to-face. I always hope it's face-to-face and we're actually doing things. But I mean, realistically speaking, a kid could meet the program requirements if every month they text me and said, hey, Nick, I'm doing well, don't need anything. I probably wouldn't close that kid out of the program. I'd keep them open on my caseload. If they didn't reach out to me, I reach out to them. But, you know, they're going to meet those minimum requirements because it's just, they don't require a whole lot on their end. Obviously, we hope that more than that happens. But yeah, the program. So, I mean, it's tough to describe the program, I guess, because it's different for every kid. I mean, I always say like my day could be like I could be, you know, picking up a homeless kid and trying to help them find housing or a job or whatever in the morning. And then that afternoon, I could be touring BSC with a 4.0 student. And so the program looks completely different for every kid that I work with. And where they're at kind of age. And, you know, as we're getting closer to 18, I might be, you know, we're looking at getting a permit and a driver's license and, you know, jobs and preparing for college maybe, or tech school or whatever they're looking at doing after high school. You know, a lot of the 16-year-olds and stuff, they're coming to we have a monthly group. They come to that. I can meet with them. I mean, some of those same things that we do with like 17 and up, we do those same things with 16-year-olds too, depending upon where they're at in life. I mean, one of the first things we do when I meet with a kid is we sit down and we have an IL plan sheet that we look at, and it's broken down into like education, employment, housing, daily living skills, and transportation. And we look at that and we try to outline, you know, what their goals are. So not what your caseworker's goals are, your parents' goals for you or anything like that. What are your goals in each of those areas? And then what things can I help you do to achieve those goals? And so it really, it's focused on that youth and what they want to get out of the program and what they want. I mean, there's some youth that are in the program that they only use it for the financial aspects of the program because I can think of like one girl that I had that was living with her grandparents. And they were a licensed foster family, but you know, they're super involved in her life. They helped her get her permanent license. They were in a smaller area, so they helped her get a job. They had both were able to help her do her job or her college applications. I did her FAFSA with her because they hadn't done that before, but you know, it just kind of depends on where a kid's at. And then I got foster parents that are just as involved as that, you know, and not grandparents, but and then I have some kids that go home and remain in the program and the parents aren't able to support them like that. And so then we're able to step in and do those things that, you know, other people would typically step up and do. But so financial aspects of the program, I guess, every kid in the program is eligible for $250 a year in flex funds. It's just kind of a catch-all for anything that I can help or justify as helping the kid be more independent. So I've, you know, paid for car insurance so that they can continue to get to and from work, work clothes, permit tests, driving classes, cell phone plans. So if they're trying to get a job, and we run it all the time, kids are trying to get a job, but they don't have a cell phone. And so it's like they can't contact you. And so things like that we can use that money for. Kids that age out of the system are eligible for $1,000 room and board fund. And we use that money to help them get set up, typically in an apartment when they turn 8 or not 18, but whenever. Again, they can choose to use that money at 21 or 22. But there's $1,000 that I usually use to help furnish or get, you know, pay for a security deposit or first month's rent or anything like that. So the big one is they get what they call an education and training voucher. So any kid that ages out of foster care, is adopted after 16 years or older or enters into a kinship guardianship, they're eligible for $25,000 towards schooling after high school. So we've used that money for, like, I got a girl that's in cosmetology school right now. I got a girl that's doing, you know, 4-year degree at NDSU, 2-year degrees up at BSC, weld school, a whole number of things we can use those funds for. So that's kind of Chafee in a nutshell. So the easiest way to look at that is any kid that's 14 years of age or older is eligible for that program. Like the one kid I have on my caseload right now, he was in foster care for 9 months when he was 14, and I could still work with him when he's 18. So anywhere from that to I have a kid that's been in, you know, 41 placements, foster care since he was 6 months old, is, you know, still in 18 plus, and I still work with him and probably will till he's, you know, 23 or 26 years old. So it's a huge range of kids and situations. So yeah. Yeah, so every region has coordinators. Fargo's actually got 2. And then one covers like the Valley City area too. But they have 2 in Fargo, 1 in Grand Forks, Jamestown, Bismarck, Minot, Williston, Dickinson, Devil's Lake. Adopted after the age of 6. I mean, well, it wouldn't matter. They'd be eligible if they were in foster care after 14. They'd be eligible for the program. The only thing that would change as far as would be financial benefits to the program if the adoption occurred 16 years or older. But yeah, any kid. And then, I mean, we transfer kids just because of the way kids move around the state sometimes. So, and it all depends kind of what's going on. I mean, if we have someone that's been working with a kid for a number of years in Dickinson, like your kid, and then, you know, comes to Bismarck, we're not just going to say, all right, bump them over to Nick. The situations change and we don't want to be flip-flopping coordinators all the time. And I'll still do courtesy stuff for them. If things need to get done, I can go there and visit and help and whatever. But we only usually change cases if kids, we know they're permanently going to be moving or, the coordinator can't take that kid on their caseload or whatever. So, yeah. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, 16. So I get that question a lot, and people, I just literally this week I had a question from a foster parent because they're looking at adopting a kid and they've had her for quite a while. And the question was, we know there's financial benefits to her aging out and she can age out, but we want to adopt her at some point too, but we don't care if we do it now or at age 21. And it's like, well, I mean, I'm not the one that's going to make the decision. That's up to the youth and other people that are involved, not me. I can just lay out the program and what we can offer given what she chooses, and if that influences her decision in the adoption paperwork and things like that aren't as important as the things that we can help with, then great. If the adoption is, more emotionally beneficial for her, then go for it, But yeah, the differences are, so every kid in the program gets $250 a year in flex funds. If they were to leave foster care and not age out and have the adoption prior to 16 or kinship guardianship prior to 16, they would just be eligible for $250 a year. If the adoption were to occur 16 or after, or kinship guardianship were to occur 16 or after, or they aged out of foster care, they'd be eligible for the ETV funds if that happened. The only little weird one there is the room and board funds. They're eligible for that if they age out, but they're not eligible for that unless they age out. So. Yeah. Yeah. If she hit 16, she'd be eligible. So if the adoption occurred after 16, she'd be eligible for those things. Yep. Yeah. 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 Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 And so that's how the financial stuff would work, I guess. The other two programs that are new that recently opened up, they were, I don't know what the state calls them. What do they call them? Supervised independent living programs. Yeah. So the state they sort of opened up like a new category of placement for 18 plus youth, and they call it supervised independent living programs. And then I guess we yanked that from them and stole it. We have accommodated independent living and supported independent living, and the names are irrelevant, but our accommodated program is offered to any youth that's eligible for the 18 plus program and then sign themselves back into foster care at 18 years of age or older. That accommodated program, we have fully furnished apartments in Bismarck that we rent from. And so the youth that are eligible for those, they can stay in there for up to a year. And a lot of the things that we help with Chafee, I mean, if I have a kid that's an 18 plus and doing our supported or our accommodated independent living program or our supported program, I'm going to be working with them in Chafee and in those programs. And so a lot of the goal, I mean, we do a lot of the same stuff. So like we lay out goals and what you want to work on, and we help you achieve those goals, I guess. Prior to 18 plus supervised independent living programs, with the exception of probably like DBGR had a home program. It was basically if a kid was attached to a foster home, that was the only 18 plus option. And so now there's a bunch of options with our fully furnished apartments. A youth can live in an apartment by themselves that they sign a lease on, or they can have roommates. They can live in the college dorms and they can remain in 18 plus. So there's a lot of options that are now there, because I mean sometimes what we'd run into is we'd have kids aging out and then there wasn't a foster home available for them, but they would have still liked to have continued in foster care, and there may just not have been options. So do you want me to go into rules? So there's so the accommodated program where we sign the lease and fully furnish it and they can be in there for a year. Some of the benefits to that beyond working with me and helping is, the first 3 months they don't pay anything to be in there. Then they pay 200, 400, and 600, so broken down into quarters throughout the year. All that money that we take in rent is put into an account, and then they get all that back at the end of the program. Basically, it's just a way for us to sort of get a gauge and for them to get a feel for, number one, what it's like to pay rent and have that money leave your account every month. And then it also lets us know whether or not at the end of that program that kid's going to be ready to live on their own. Because if you can't pay me $600 a month for the apartment, you're not going to be able to pay your landlord. Yeah. Real. Yeah. So in addition to the basically getting the place paid for while they're in there with they get $300 a month towards food, which every kid that I've had in the program has been able to eat whatever they wanted to for the month on $300 and haven't needed extra money. Trying to think. Then they get a small clothing allowance every month as needed, so if they need clothes we can help, but it's not just there every month to spend. So that's that program. They can be in that program up to a year, and then they can the supportive programs is like dorm rooms, apartments that they sign a lease on. They can have roommates, things like that. They get $250 a month, so we cut a check every month to their landlord. So that's $250 every month. We put $250 into an account for them, and then they get $100 towards food plus working with me. Ideally, I mean, that for the programs are designed, what would be nice to have happen is when a kid is, it doesn't have to happen at 18, but when a kid is looking at transitioning to being on their own, it'd be nice to have them go into our apartment so that they don't have to sign a lease. Our landlords that we've worked with have already said that if they don't have issues with that kid in the apartment throughout that year, that they would they'd be more than happy to let that kid sign a lease, even if the credit's not the greatest or they don't have any credit and they have no rental history offered, obviously. So, but it'd be nice to transition from that program to then on their own in some capacity. But it's fluid again. They can go if let's say a kid goes to the dorms and they're deciding that's what I want to do, I want to go to college and live in the dorms, and they stay in the program, and then they decide that I don't want to go to college anymore and I can't live in the dorms, so I want to go get a place of my own. They can then switch to accommodated and come into a fully furnished apartment at that point too. So, yeah, so those are, being a part of the program, you have to meet 18 plus requirements. So the same rule, I mean, they either have to be working full-time or not full-time. According to 18 plus, they're gonna be working 80 hours a month. Our push, obviously, if they're not in school, would be for full-time work. Or they can be in school full-time or a combination of both. So yeah, they would have to be meeting those requirements in order to be in the program. As far as like rules and stuff, I mean, I'm honest with the kids. I hope they feel like they're living on their own. I mean, obviously they're not living on their own because we're providing a bunch of financial support every month, but I don't want to be like this looming figure that's, hovering over them either. I mean, the whole point is to hopefully get a feel for what it's like to be on your own. So, like when I do twice a month, I do visits at the apartment, unless I need to be there more often. And, I mean, they're all scheduled ahead of time. The kids know I'm coming over. I don't there's curfews written in our rules. Yeah. I ain't got time for that. And there's rules regarding curfew and stuff like that. I just kind of breeze right over that as we're going through our list of stuff to do, because I'm not going to be checking at midnight to see if a kid's in bed. But it's in the rules, and don't tell my supervisor that I never do that. Huh? No, none of that. I don't do that. That's what Amber's for. Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I don't know, that program's been pretty successful, I would say, as far as kids wanting to participate. Fargo's really taken off. But yeah, that's what I do. Something like that.
Yeah.
Knock it off. So guardianship doesn't necessarily have to be kin, so it doesn't have to be family. That's one of the biggest differences. Where kin guardianship, they have to be blood of some sort or fictive kin, which is pretty natural in Native American country, where they're not maybe blood relative, but through the line of fictive kin they are. So that's one of the biggest differences. It's really taken off in the state for a number of reasons, especially in this area. I remember there's a lot of grandparents and uncles and aunts taking care of their family, and the court a couple years ago really organized to have it under one. It's in the Juvenile Court Act 2720 if anybody's interested in reading law, but basically it's just a way for kids not to linger in foster care if family wants to take care of them. The one thing that the department has just started is we have now a kinship navigator program. And so it supplies, even though family can take care of other family members, they sometimes don't have the fiscal means to take in 3 of their, sometimes it's a sibling, sometimes it's nieces and nephews. So we do have some funds coming in from the federal government to support that program. But really the biggest difference is guardianship can be, I can have my neighbor's kids and I can be their guardian. The court can grant me the guardianship because I can take care of them. The family's okay with me taking care of them. There is no other family around. And so, but kin has to be family typically. Yeah, so through the guardianship program or through guardianship through the court. So every 3 years, the guardian has to supply what assets that child has. But anybody, any party, a parent, the guardian themselves could write the court, call the court and say, I need a hearing. Mom could say, I've got my stuff together. I finished treatment. I want my kids back. And then there's a hearing set up and then they'll proceed from there. Yes. Mm-hmm. Oh, it is. So they're doing yearly, they're doing annual. Okay. 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 That's good to know. Yes, so there is a stipend through the state that you can apply for. It can be run through the zones. So if the zones were involved in any way, shape, or form, they can assist with that, or you can contact, the department. It's going to be based on the child's needs. So it's usually a stipend for clothing. It's a stipend for school supplies. It's usually a cost based on expenses. Yes. Yeah. So it's not like a foster care payment. It's just based on the needs of the child and the expenses occurred. Not necessarily. It's based on the child's needs. Yep.
We end up having guardianships that have nothing, the system is not involved at all. And so I've never seen a guardianship, what we kind of slang wise, I guess, refer to as private guardianships. That there's, but I've never seen one where there's any of the subsidized. Those funds have to come through the county, right, or through a application by the county to access those. Oh, okay, because I've never even talked to a family about that, but we Sharla and I will see guardianships where the county's been involved, the human service zone has been involved, and they've actually worked with the people who are going to become the guardians and done a lot of the legwork and help the potential guardians get background checks and those types of different things. And my understanding is right now the human service zones are really only participating in those types of guardianships where there's affidavits in support of them by the parents, correct? Or okay, that's what I've ended up seeing. Okay, that was a position your state's attorney took with me, so yeah.
And we're doing that right now. Peg, you've got this wonderful woman wanting to have some kind of, she wants TPR because she thinks her daughter's going to someday be okay. And so she wants to do guardianship a year at a time. Get the county out. Oh, get the county out in a good, kind way. I mean that. Yeah, right. And then she can still have some control, and she can still sign off or whatever she would need to do. I think it's a really good plan for this woman specifically, and she can still hope and pray for her. Yeah, you're great, your job. She can still hope and pray her daughter will get back on her feet and do well, and maybe someday parent. Mary Jo?
So I would rarely see that. I personally haven't seen that in my career, but I don't think it's a bad suggestion if people are interested in it. I mean, the guardianship role is really so people can sign medical consents, educational releases, because we would have a lot of times teenagers that basically were living from couch to couch to couch, and we couldn't get them access to education or their medical needs or treatment. And so the category of guardianship was created so that kids could get registered in school and get their GED and things like that. I haven't seen it go that way, but certainly, I don't think it's a terrible idea. Yeah, and I think that's where you'd ask your zone worker to apply for subsidized guardianships. And so we can, so basically it's subsidizing your costs for that child as the guardian rather than a foster parent. It's a newer program. Go ahead. No, the subsidized guardianship has been around a long time. The kinship's newer. The subsidized guardian's been around a long time. The difference is the state was limited for a long time to only 80 kids in the program to pay for it because of the funding. Now we're up to 120. So we're slowly growing that program because we know it's more valuable rather than kids lingering in a foster care or a facility for 2-3 years. And I think to the work that PATH has done with their independent living program and their 18 plus program, that's where kids like that really end up. If they're really with it, they should take advantage of that program.
Yeah. So we've kind of gone rounds with this before because like the way I think the state defines kinship guardianship is often confusing in relation to my program because it's federal guidelines. And maybe mine's a little bit more looser. I mean, I can say that like if you did guardianship with your youth after the age of 16, it would be a kinship guardianship and she would qualify for ETV. So all the college money. Doesn't matter. Yeah, fictive kin is what they call it. So, I mean, you basically have that parental relationship, and so we can justify that as being a kinship guardianship. So county workers, when I ask you to fill out those foster care verification forms and it says kinship guardianship date, just put that sucker on there, would you? Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I know there's a couple of questions. I just want to clarify two things. So Peggy, if you raise your hand, brought up state's attorneys, and that's an important part of the foster process because every state's attorney, is an elected official, and they might operate their practice or process different. So what a state's attorney in Burleigh County might decide to do regarding a TPR or shelter care could be different than the state's attorney in Morton County. So I just want you to keep that in mind. The other thing is, and Sharla brought this up a little bit, but I think there is a general myth in the public that in order to have a guardianship type of relationship, you have to go through child welfare. And so I think that's an important thing that as foster parents, we can help dispel, to say like, hey, you can establish, a parent or grandparent can establish guardianship either willfully with their adult child or requesting a guardianship hearing without having to go through the child welfare process. If that's something that, family can come to the table or someone can come to the table and do right away. You had a question. The Burleigh, yeah. This is Cory's favorite topic. So we are still in limbo in Burleigh County without a zone director. Tayon Nachatilo is still the interim zone director. Tayon was the business manager and has been asked to take on the interim role. And so there's a couple of you obviously that work in Burleigh. So she has been amazing and really making sure that there's stability in the organization, but we realize there's still a need for a long-term role. Our initial plan was to fill an interim role that focused on change, culture, building teamwork, and really that engagement within the community. And then we would fill the long-term role after completing that 1 year interim. We are in the process of working with the zone board on that right now and have completed interviews. And that's really all I can share on that because of the process that we're in. I hope in the next couple weeks we'll have information that we can share to foster parents and employees on the next steps in that process. We have a functioning zone board. It's great. That is a very good question. So there is only one county commissioner on the zone board. I'm not going to say anything else about that. So Commissioner Becky Matthews she chairs the zone board currently. And she's awesome. We have someone from the sheriff's department. We have a school social worker. We have a retired therapist and Senator Oban. So there's our 5 zone members. And I would not be able to, let's see if I could do Tracy Famous is from the schools. Yep. Galen Becker used to be a therapist and have his own practice. Becky Matthews, Senator Oban, and I'm not going to remember the gentleman from the sheriff's department. Jim. So those are the 5 that are on the zone board. They are very active. They're actually looking at data. We hope to have a meeting here in the next couple of weeks to move forward with the director role. So. Okay, you have to repeat that, Mary Jo. I didn't hear what you said. Yeah, so actually, Cory was going to talk about that.
Thanks, Sarah. Yes. So the one thing I mentioned is legislation just passed that licensing is going to go to the state, to the department. And so the one thing we are going to be looking for are volunteers because we're looking to redesign licensing, adoption, and really the criteria around those things. And we really want to get feedback from foster parents that have either gone through it. I've gotten a lot of feedback from this one. So I have some good information. Some. No, really, I mean, we really want to make it a streamlined process. Right now in North Dakota, when you do foster and you do adoption, it's two separate licensing processes. It is a total waste of people's time, in my personal opinion. And correct. So we are going to streamline that process. We do want the feedback. We will be looking for volunteers, unpaid positions to tell us every good, bad, and ugly thing you've experienced, so we can make it a painless, seamless process, not just for you all, but so we can recruit, retain, so they're safe places for children. I mean, that's really the bottom line for all of us today. So, yes, so we will be, I mean, I'll take volunteers now if you want to make a list, but we are going to be working on the redesign process, I would say in the next 6 to 8 months, because we need to have that kind of
Transition January 1st, 2022 is when
Right.
employees become a state stamp.
Yeah.
We'd like to process those.
Yeah, so we're going to take the next 6 months to really build and look at the process. And then as we transition the current licensing team to state. So we're going to be looking for volunteers to help us with that.
I wouldn't anticipate some of those things would change. What we are looking at is how do we make the process more efficient, more effective, more people-centered. With the whole idea, everyone's kind of wondering whose kid is that screaming, right? I'm going to call not it right now, but I have declared that we officially have the loudest child in the world in my house. He's 4, and we will take that honor, the loudest child. Anyway, so what we want to look at is we look at the whole process. We look at what's the bottleneck of the process. How do we need to fix that? And then similar to when we made childcare licensing state, we have to look at how can we effectively cover the whole state. We have a lot of people who, they wear the hat of being a part-time foster licenser, and then they're a part-time CPS worker, and then they're a part-time intake worker. And that's not really an effective way to do foster licensing or any of the other jobs that they have. And so this is saying this is just a specialty foster licensing team. They don't do casework. They don't do home visits, for kids. They are there just to license. So they will become employees. Here's what I will say. I think it doesn't have, the soonest we can do it is January 1st, 2022. What we've learned through all of our other redesigns, and some of you may have been part of those processes or felt the outcome of some of those processes, is we need to go slow. We need to make sure that we're getting all of the feedback and that we have to have really strong communication with all the stakeholders involved. We're in the process right now of redesigning other programs at the zones like economic assistance. We've done the CPS process with the new safety framework practice model. We have a new CPS central intake, and those things, nothing we roll out is going to be perfect on day one. So we've got some growing pains we're experiencing right now. And so we want to go slow as we do this process so that it's not just the licensing process, but then we'll eventually be doing the full adoption and foster process as well.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, so what we did was we looked at, there's the models around other parts of the country where it talks about why are we involved in families' lives, right? So why is CPS involved? And what we know is when you look at the data of North Dakota with our child protection, we know there's way more reporting than there's actually child abuse and neglect. It's about 3 times the reporting. Sometimes it's because maybe a school principal and a social worker in the school filed on the same thing. That's very possible. That happens quite often, right? Or a foster parent files something, and so does a school, right? Something they see when the child first comes. So we know that child protection reports are up, but actually child protection abuse and neglect has stayed pretty steady. It has stayed pretty steady for a long time. What we have noticed though is foster care continues to go up and up and up and up. Now, that doesn't mean we're not doing the right thing and keeping kids safe. There's 2 ways we have foster care going up: emergencies coming in and kids never going home. Kids never going home is probably the difficult part, because reunification after a child is in foster care for more than 8 months, usually reunification is about 20 to 30% that they go home. Not very good. North Dakota's really poor right now, and that's not a shot at the workers. I've done that work, taking kids into custody and trying to bring them back home. It is hard work. Families kind of get defeated, they kind of lose touch, or they just won't do what we've asked them to do, which is get healthy, right? And so what we did was we took a framework from a number of states. Wisconsin was one of them. We went out to Wisconsin and learned about safety in the home. How do we keep kids safe in the home with planning and services? And so the new safety practice model is really around, if we have to be in that child's life, can they stay home? Can we safety plan them home and case manage them at home? If they can't be, is there family that can do that? And if there's a present danger, we have to put them in foster care, at least temporarily. The goal would always be that we don't ever remove kids, right? That's the ultimate goal. We know that's not a possibility, but when kids are removed, we should try to get parents and the child a safe place so they can return as soon as possible. North Dakota, adoptions are going up, foster care is going up, the need for foster care is going up, but our incidences of reporting of child abuse and neglect has stayed flat. So we have to turn the curve at some point. It isn't to eliminate foster care, because that's not a thing. It's not to stop adoptions. That's not a thing. We would like to see a reduction. We would like to see a reduction because we know historically most kids do better with family. That's not a shot at foster parents. It's not a shot at the facilities that work their butts off to keep kids safe. It is, though, where kids go home eventually. Even if they're 19, 20, they want to be home. And so the safety practice model is around being in families' lives where we are legally responsible to be in their home. If we're not legally responsible, we need to get out of the way and let families be families while keeping them safe at the same time. So that's kind of the goal of the new model.
Well, obviously I can only speak about my caseload. I'm not looking at national data, but from the perspective of my caseload, until we really, really get better at providing substance use disorder treatment, we are not going to reunify families. That is like hands down the big issue.
So I'm going to say something that's probably pretty unpopular, that substance use does not have to equal removal. So I just want that. So that's hard sometimes, I think, even as foster parents, to be like, it's okay for a child to stay living in a home, even if a parent is using. The goal is that if the parent chooses to use, there are safety plans and options so that that child is safe. And so that is a change in philosophy. I think historically it was, even if the parent is using marijuana, we got to remove the child. And that really is, that direction is changing. And I know as foster parents, sometimes that's hard because there's probably nobody who knows that family better than you, especially if you've had that child for a long time. You know the using patterns, you know when parents are high, when they can't take care of themselves. But the reality is substance use should not be the only reason a child is removed unless it is creating an unsafe environment. The other thing I want to editorialize or comment on is I've heard a lot of, well, when the court date happens again in 12 months. So I just want to note that a child does, just because we have care for 12 months or custody for 12 months does not mean that child has to stay in foster care for 12 months. That if parents are making progress and we can reunify sooner, we don't have to wait for that court date in 12 months. No, you never have to apologize. Keep going.
Yeah, that's a great question. So where this model came from, the first thing we set up in the Families First is what you're alluding to, is the Families First prevention plan. What that does, for the first time ever in our country, the feds are saying we can give you money to prevent removals. We used to have to use federal money for only foster care after a family was so bad we had to take a kid out. Now the feds are saying you can use all that money you want on the front end. So right now what we have is we have our 4E prevention plan. I won't get in the weeds with it too much, but there are a number of evidence-based programs that can be paid by the feds with a 50% match by the state to provide services in home for families for little kids. So we have about 4 that are for little kids or moms that are expecting, and for teenager kind of behavior stuff. One of the biggest things with 4A money is the payer of last resort. That money is. So if they're on Blue Cross, if they're on MA, those services can be paid for now. What we don't have in North Dakota, which is really a tough thing for me to swallow after 25 years, is actually people that want to do evidence-based treatment. We have a lot of people doing treatment, like one-on-one therapy, nothing against therapy, but it's not evidence-based. There's nothing evidence-based about it. And so it's really encouraging our providers independently or as agencies to look at evidence-based models that we can bring to kids and families in their house, rather than them, taking day off work, getting out of school and having to drive to somewhere to get a service after they, parents can't take time off. They can't afford it, or kids can't miss school. They miss too many days of school. We have to bring the service to them. And so that's the new model, is bringing services to schools, bringing services to families. And to do that, though, we need providers in the state. And I'll pick on PATH. PATH has looked into, we've given them grants now to do these evidence-based models. They're going to be one of our folks that do that. We've got another number of other people that have, but we still have some providers that they're okay with not doing evidence-based services. And we need them to jump into the evidence-based models because we know they're proven. There's data on them that show that families get healthier if we use these programs. And one of them is Healthy Families. Healthy Families goes into homes with little kids and teaches parents or moms, expecting mothers, how to raise kids, teaches them skills at a very young age. And really it keeps families together. That's the end goal. So hopefully that answered your question.
Oh, a vacancy, open position. So what I will tell you is, originally it did take longer. Now we have an employment committee that meets twice a week. So it used to go to their county commissioner. So if they had a vacancy or they wanted to request a new FTE, they would have to wait for a county commissioner meeting or sending it to a commission. When we first started doing zones, it would just funnel up to the state. There'd be a couple of us that have to approve it. We've now formed an employment committee. They've been going for about 4 or 5 months, and it has 3 zone directors that are on it, and then our HR and fiscal team from the state. And they review every request. I believe they meet every Tuesday and Thursday to review those and are able to respond pretty quickly.
I think the other thing just to mention for this group is zones. The reason I would say the beauty of the zone, if what came out of that is, zones really should be sharing resources. So if Burley has an opening and Dakota Central up north have lower caseloads or can spare someone for even 2 weeks to support each other, where before, if you didn't work for that zone, you didn't work for that zone. And now we can have some sharing.
Yeah, to build on what Cory said, zones are administrative hubs, but they should never define geographic boundaries. So you guys are part of the Burley Human Service Zone, but Dakota Central could be helping staff or providing foster homes, or Three Rivers. That is a huge culture shift, and it's not going to happen overnight, but we kind of repeat this mantra with zone directors. Like, zones are administrative hubs for services, but they do not define geographic boundaries for service. And it's getting there, but even the idea of saying, hey, we're going to share foster homes across the state, like initially zone directors were like, but these are my foster homes. I cultivate them. I treat them a certain way. I don't want to share them with anyone else. There's a need. We've got to find the foster home. And so we're seeing a lot more of kind of cross zone collaboration in that respect. I'm going to grab her first. So
Next. No, yeah, I mean, the idea is yes, like to get into the home and to what Jim said earlier, I think, there's a point at which we've got to look at this from a larger perspective. Is it a skill set that a parent needs, or they just don't have the will to go to treatment? I mean, we have to know the difference between the skill and the will of that family member or that child. Not every family has the skill. And so going in and teaching them skill sets to take care of their kids, it seems like a basic thing, but a lot of people as you all know, don't have it. And we need to go in and build it. So that's the idea. Plus with the support of the zones and in the in-home case management, that's going to be a support. So it's twofold. One, there's case management at the zones, but the skill building and the service delivery will be from the private providers that will pay. So we won't be hiring people on. We'll be funneling funds to that agency or that individual provider, a specialist, a therapist, to do an evidence-based model within that home structure to build that skill. The idea is, right, the idea is to break down the boundaries of transportation. I can't get off work, right? You have to bring the service to the folks that need it. Go ahead. So I see a combination, right? So if they're working with the zones, there's always going to be a case manager that's helping with some of those things. But then the therapeutic model and the evidence-based model will be providing the other side of it, right? The service delivery. There's case management, then there's service, two different things.
I think you had a question. That's you, not me.
Yeah. You could be on a lot of committees.
Why don't you just volunteer for the state and we'll figure something out?
So the one thing I would just say, and goes to another area where Sara mentioned we're going to do some redesign work, is in that foster care and foster parenting, which is around being the supportive foster parent, not a substitute parent. It's a totally different shift in some areas. Obviously, it sounds like that's what you're already doing. But in the nation, foster parents have always been seen as supportive housing for kids that are orphans or can't go home. And really what the model should be is foster parents should support the parent in any way they can as far as with transitioning and things. So, I mean, you're speaking my language at this point. Right. Right.
I'm taking away the microphone because it's 8 o'clock at this point. No, what? No.
Okay, okay. Okay, so we'll cut you guys off for a moment. As you know, the Foster Care Association had a clothing room, and we collaborated with Closet 701. If you have not heard about that yet, it's a donation place, and myself and Joe Roloff, we've helped with them there at Closet 701. So if anybody needs clothing during the night, if we get those wonderful placements at 1 o'clock in the morning on a Friday night, didn't need anything, or they're even very open to if people growth spurts or anything else, please just come. They have certain shopping days and anything else, but just to let you know, we did keep some stuff from the clothing room, which is pajamas and underwear. So Joe has 9 tubs in her attic. So if you guys get new placements, please call one of us, or we are on the Facebook page. Joe wants to get rid of that stuff, but like I said, I'm always willing to go up to the closet at any time. Not saying it's supposed to stipend our monthly thing or whatever for new kids come in, but sometimes it just does help out when they're going through all these growth spurts and everything. So no. And the closet does have a lot of adult clothing, especially women's clothing, not so much men's clothing. So they are full to the brim. They have 2 or 3 shopping days. I volunteer on Saturdays, on which they're open. They are going to be closed on weekends for the summer, but definitely utilize them. They're open to foster parents coming in and getting stuff.
To go to the association from the
Woohoo!
so
Thanks, Mary Jo and Joe.
I don't want it. I'll definitely deposit this.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you guys all for being here tonight, for sharing with us. Again, additional questions, a couple are willing to hang out in the lobby and answer those questions. Sure appreciate you all and the roles you play, and it's great working with you guys.